Original post. I, 30F, have been married to my husband, Mark, 32M, for 7 years, and we have been together for nearly 10. We have 2 beautiful, chaotic, wonderful kids, a 4-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl. If you had asked me 48 hours ago, I would have told you that my life was practically perfect. We had the cozy suburban home, stable careers, and a rock-solid partnership built on trust. To make things even better, my absolute rock and platonic soulmate since our freshman year of college, Leo, 30M, was a permanent fixture in our lives. Leo is openly gay, fiercely loyal, and has been by my side through every major milestone. When I gave birth to my children, Leo was at the hospital. He is their godfather, their favorite uncle, and basically a second father to them. He lived just 10 minutes down the road and felt more like a sibling to me than a friend. For the longest time, the only minor friction in my life was that Mark and Leo didn't really click. In the early days of my marriage, they were polite but distant. Mark was a bit of a typical sports-loving guy's guy, and Leo was vibrant and artistic. They just didn't have much in common, and they used to mildly clash over silly things like weekend plans or sports versus theater. I used to joke that I had to split my heart in two to keep them both happy. But about 2 years ago, everything shifted. Suddenly, they started finding common ground. It began with the gym. Mark wanted to try a new routine, and Leo, who is a total fitness junkie, offered to train him. From there, it snowballed into a genuine friendship. They started planning bro weekends, going to football games together, and helping each other out with house projects. If Mark needed help building a deck, Leo was there. If Leo needed a ride to the airport at 4 a.m., Mark volunteered. I can't even begin to tell you how incredibly happy and relieved I was. I remember calling my mom and gushing about how my 2 favorite men in the whole world were finally best friends. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. I felt completely surrounded by love. Then came Tuesday. It was a completely mundane, ordinary Tuesday morning. Mark rushed out the door to catch an early morning meeting at his corporate office, accidentally leaving his personal iPad behind on the kitchen island. Around 10 a.m., while I was sitting at the table folding a mountain of toddler laundry, the iPad started buzzing. Then it buzzed again. And again. It was synced to his iPhone, and the notifications were coming in like a relentless, rapid-fire machine gun. Annoyed, and assuming it was just a spam group chat or his fantasy football league blowing up his phone, I walked over to turn off the notifications so the noise wouldn't wake up our daughter, who was napping upstairs. I tapped the screen to open the control panel, and that's when my eyes caught a preview of a message. It was from Leo. The preview read, "I can't stop smelling your cologne on my pillow. Counting down the hours until I can feel you next to me again, baby." My breath completely caught in my throat. I stared at the screen, my brain entirely short-circuiting. I thought, no, this is a joke. This is some bizarre, deeply messed up inside joke between them. With shaking hands, I bypassed the lock screen. I knew his passcode. We've always shared everything, and opened the chat. I fell straight down into a bottomless, agonizing rabbit hole of a year-long affair. It wasn't just a handful of casual, experimental texts. It was thousands of messages spanning over 12 months. There were detailed logs of hotel bookings for their bro weekends that were actually romantic getaways. There were explicit, graphic photos. There were texts coordinating hookups in our guest room or down the street at Leo's apartment while I was upstairs putting our exhausted kids to bed. But the physical betrayal wasn't even the worst part. The emotional intimacy was what completely shattered my soul into pieces. It was a diary of 2 people deeply, irrevocably in love. I saw messages from my husband to my best friend saying, "I never knew I could feel this way about a man until I met you. You've awakened a side of me I didn't know existed. I love her, but I'm in love with you." Leo replied with equal passion, calling Mark his soulmate and saying he hated sharing him with me. I stood in my kitchen, clutching the edge of the island, physically vomiting onto the hardwood floor. The 2 people I trusted most in this universe had been building an entire secret life right under my nose, laughing at my cluelessness. I didn't call Mark at work. I didn't call Leo. Instead, I spent the next 6 hours in a cold, catatonic state of shock. I methodically screenshotted every single horrific conversation, every photo, and every hotel receipt, and emailed them to a brand new, private email address I created. When evening arrived, I fed the kids, bathed them, and put them to bed early. Then I turned off every single light in the house. I sat in the pitch-black living room, illuminated only by the faint glow of Mark's iPad on the coffee table, waiting for him to come home. At 6:30 p.m., the garage door rumbled open. Mark walked in, humming a tune, throwing his keys on the counter. "Babe, why is it so dark in here?" he called out. I slid the iPad across the table. It lit up the dark room. "Who is baby, Mark?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly hollow. He froze. He looked at the iPad, then looked at me, and his face drained of all color. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he dropped to his knees, buried his face in his hands, and began violently sobbing. But as the words started pouring out of his mouth, the nightmare only deepened. He wasn't weeping out of guilt for destroying his wife. He wasn't crying because he felt remorse for the atomic bomb he just dropped on our family. He was weeping out of relief. He kept crying about how exhausting it was to live a lie, how glad he was that he didn't have to hide his true self anymore, and how he finally felt free. While I sat there, reeling from the sheer narcissism of his reaction, my front door suddenly unlocked and burst open. It was Leo. He rushed in, out of breath and frantic. Mark had secretly texted him from his smartwatch the second he realized he was caught. I braced myself for an explosion, for a screaming match, for Leo to beg for my forgiveness on his hands and knees. But what happened next was the ultimate twist. Instead of apologizing, Leo walked right past me, comforted a sobbing Mark, and then turned to face me with an eerie, calm, and deeply unsettling composure. They sat down together on the sofa opposite me, holding hands right in front of my face. Then, they laid out a pre-planned, rehearsed pitch. With absolute, unadulterated audacity, Mark looked me in the eye and said that he still loves me as the mother of his children, and that he respects me immensely. Leo chimed in, saying he loves me too and never wanted to hurt me. Their brilliant, progressive solution to this entire mess? They don't want a divorce. "We want to sell this place and buy a much bigger house together," Mark explained, his voice entirely deadpan, as if he were pitching a business merger. "Leo will move in with us permanently. We will all live together and raise the kids as a unified co-parenting unit. That way, you get to keep your marriage, the kids keep their stable family structure, and Leo and I get to be together openly. It's a win for everyone. We can make this work if you just open your mind." I felt a wave of violent vertigo wash over me. The room was spinning. I couldn't breathe. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, backed away from them, ran upstairs to our master bedroom, and slammed and locked the door behind me. That was last night. Right now, I am typing this from my bed. I can hear them downstairs in the kitchen, clinking glasses and whispering, acting like they just proposed some beautiful, modern, enlightened solution to a minor lifestyle hurdle. Meanwhile, I feel like I am trapped in a psychological horror movie. My entire support system is gone, and the people who swore to protect me are treating my psychological torture like a lifestyle upgrade. Am I losing my mind? Is this real life? What do I do? Update. It's been a little over a week since my world completely imploded, and honestly, reading through the thousands of comments on my first post is the only thing keeping me tethered to reality right now. When I locked myself in my bedroom that night, I felt completely isolated. I kept asking myself if I was the crazy one, if I was just being narrow-minded, or if I was genuinely living through a nightmare. Your comments confirmed what my gut was screaming. I am being subjected to an unprecedented level of emotional manipulation. Here is everything that has transpired since my last post. Buckle up, because it somehow gets so much worse. I didn't sleep for a single second that night. I sat up in bed, staring at the door, listening to the muffled, low murmuring of my husband and my former best friend talking downstairs until almost 4 a.m. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the text messages. I saw the timeline of a whole year where I was completely made a fool of. When morning finally broke, I dragged my exhausted, aching body downstairs to get the kids ready for preschool. I walked into the kitchen, braced for an awkward silence or a tearful apology. Instead, I walked into something that felt like a straight-up horror movie. Mark and Leo were both standing at the stove. Leo was wearing one of Mark's old college t-shirts. They were happily flipping pancakes, humming along to music, and laughing. My 4-year-old son was sitting at the island, coloring, completely oblivious. The atmosphere was so unnervingly cheerful, so entirely normal, that I stood in the doorway frozen. It felt like I had stumbled into a cult. "Good morning, sunshine," Leo said, flashing me a warm, bright smile as if he hadn't just systematically dismantled my entire life the night before. "We made blueberry pancakes. Sit down, we've got coffee ready for you." Mark looked up, completely serene, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, babe, sit down. We should eat as a family." I felt physically sick. I ignored them, packed my kids' lunchboxes in a dead silence, and told my son to get his shoes on. The second the garage door shut and the kids were safely buckled into my car, I marched back into the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely form words, but I looked at Mark and screamed, "Get him out of my house. Now. I want a divorce, Mark. It's over. I am filing for divorce, and I want both of you away from me." The mask immediately dropped. The cheerful, progressive, loving facade evaporated in a heartbeat, and the raw, ugly manipulation began. Instead of looking guilty, Mark crossed his arms and looked at me with an expression of profound disappointment. "I can't believe you're being this rigid," he said, shaking his head. "We came to you with a beautiful, mature, modern solution that protects our children from a broken home, and you're throwing a temper tantrum." Leo stepped forward, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "We knew you'd have a knee-jerk reaction, but honestly, this level of hostility is really disappointing. It borders on homophobia, to be honest." Mark finally accepts his true identity. He finally finds real love with someone who understands him, and your first instinct is to try to destroy him financially and socially? You're being incredibly backward-minded. Homophobic. I choked out, my voice cracking. "You slept with my husband for a year. You lied to my face every single day. You held my babies while sneaking around with their father." "That's in the past," Mark actually said, entirely deadpan. "We are trying to move forward in an enlightened way. If you refuse to even consider buying a bigger house and co-living, it proves you care more about your own wounded ego and outdated societal standards than you do about the stability and happiness of our children." They tag-teamed me for 20 minutes, gaslighting me into believing that my pain was just a symptom of my own selfishness. They told me that a good mother would swallow her pride to keep the family unit intact. By the time I escaped to my car to drive to work, my head was spinning so violently I had to pull over to the side of the road to weep. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick, drove to a coffee shop in a town 30 minutes away, and spent hours researching the most cutthroat, aggressive family law attorneys in our area. I managed to book an emergency consultation for the following afternoon with a woman named Sarah, who came highly recommended for high-conflict divorces. Walking into Sarah's office was the first time I felt a spark of protection. I laid out the entire story, showed her the thousands of screenshots I had saved to my private email, and explained the bizarre, throuple proposal. Sarah listened to me with a grim, professional intensity. But when I asked her how fast we could get them out of my life, she gave me a massive, incredibly harsh reality check. "First of all," Sarah explained, leaning forward, "you live in a no-fault divorce state. The court does not care about the emotional trauma of infidelity. The fact that your husband had an affair with a man, and that the man was your best friend, is legally irrelevant. It won't grant you an automatic victory. Assets are split 50-50, period." My heart sank. But it got worse. I asked about custody. Surely a judge would see how unhinged their behavior was? Unless you can prove that Mark or Leo are actively harming or neglecting the children, a judge is going to view Mark as a father who deserves 50% joint custody, Sarah warned me. Furthermore, if you file aggressively right now without a strategy, Mark still has a full legal right to reside in the marital home. You cannot lock him out. You cannot legally bar Leo from being around the children during Mark's parenting time unless we can prove a specific, tangible danger. Then we hit the biggest hurdle, the finances. Mark has always handled our primary finances. He is a corporate executive. I work in mid-level administration. Our mortgage, our car payments, and our savings are all tied up in accounts he manages. If you freeze the joint accounts or file a motion immediately, Sarah told me, it might trigger a retaliatory move. If he decides to cut off your access to funds before a temporary support order is placed by a judge, you could find yourself unable to pay for groceries, let alone my retainer. You need to play dumb for just a little bit. We need to build a financial profile. I need you to go home, pretend you are thinking over their living arrangement proposal, and quietly gather every single tax return, bank statement, investment portfolio, and property deed you can find. So I had to go back to that house and pretend to consider sharing my life, my home, and my husband with the man who stabbed me in the back. For 3 days, I nodded, acted quiet and reflective, and spent my nights quietly photographing financial documents while Mark slept. By the weekend, I couldn't take the isolation anymore. I knew that if I filed for divorce quietly, Mark and Leo would control the narrative. They would tell everyone that I was the bitter, unhinged ex-wife who ruined the family over a modern misunderstanding. I needed an ally. I decided to call Mark's parents. They are relatively traditional, family-oriented people who absolutely adore our kids. I invited them over for a casual Sunday dinner under the guise of wanting to see them. Mark was thrilled, thinking I was completely normalizing everything and slipping back into my submissive role. Leo even offered to stay over to help host. The dinner was agonizing. Mark and Leo were interacting with a subtle, sickening domesticity, passing dishes, brushing shoulders, sharing inside smiles. I sat at the end of the table, feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. Once the kids finished eating, I cleared their plates and sent them upstairs to the playroom to watch a movie. I walked back into the dining room, sat down, and looked at my mother-in-law and father-in-law. "Mom, Dad, I didn't invite you here just for dinner," I said, my voice completely steady. "I invited you here because Mark and Leo have a proposal they want to share with you." Mark shot me a panicked, warning look, but it was too late. I pulled out a printed packet of the text messages, just a few of the most undeniable, explicit ones, and slid them across the table to his parents. "Mark and Leo have been having an affair for the past year," I stated calmly. "And their plan is for us to sell this house, buy a bigger one together, and have Leo move in permanently to raise the kids as a throuple. Mark refuses to leave, and they are telling me that I am selfish for wanting a divorce." The explosion that followed was cataclysmic. My mother-in-law picked up the papers, read the first few lines, and let out a sound that I can only describe as a strangled gasp. She looked at her son, her eyes wide with absolute disgust. "Mark? What is this? What have you done?" Mark stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "Mom, don't look at that. She's violating my privacy. She's trying to poison you." My father-in-law, a typically quiet, imposing man, stood up next. He read the texts, slammed his fist on the dining table so hard the wine glasses shattered, and looked directly at Leo. "Get out of this house," he roared, his voice shaking with a rage I have never heard before. "Get out of my daughter-in-law's house right now before I throw you out myself. You are a disgusting parasite." Leo looked terrified. He grabbed his keys and practically ran out the front door. But instead of breaking down or realizing the gravity of what he had done, Mark dug his heels in further. He turned on his own parents, screaming at the top of his lungs. He told his mother she was a judgmental, outdated hypocrite. He told his father that he was dead to him. "I finally found out who I am," Mark screamed, tears streaming down his face. "I finally found true, authentic love, and my own family is treating me like a criminal. You are all dead to me. I don't care about your archaic rules anymore." His parents left in tears, promising to support me in whatever way they could, but the aftermath inside the house was cold, dark, and terrifying. Mark spent the rest of the night slamming doors, throwing things, and yelling that I was a manipulative bitch who was intentionally ruining his relationship with his family. An hour after his parents left, my phone buzzed. It was a novel of a text message from Leo. I want to share a direct quote from it because the psychological gymnastics are truly breathtaking. I thought you loved me enough to want me to be happy, Leo wrote. I have spent my whole life feeling alone, and I finally found true, cosmic love, and it just happens to be with Mark. We never wanted to replace you. We wanted to expand the love in this family. Why can't you just accept that love wins? Your bitterness is going to ruin your children's lives, not our love. I hope one day your heart softens enough to realize we were offering you a beautiful life. Reading those words from my college best friend, the person who held my hair back when I was sick, the person I shared every secret with, was a level of pain I cannot accurately describe. It felt like a double bereavement. My husband and my best friend died, and they were replaced by two completely unrecognizable, selfish monsters. After the dinner explosion, the living situation degenerated into an absolute war zone. Mark realized that his peaceful throuple pitch was dead, so he shifted tactics to pure, unadulterated intimidation. He refused to leave the house, constantly reminding me that his name was on the deed and he had a legal right to be there. And to punish me for telling his parents, he started bringing Leo over to the house every single day. He would walk Leo right through the front door, sit him down on our living room couch, and claim they were normalizing Leo's presence for the children's psychological adjustment. It reached a horrifying boiling point 3 nights ago. It was bedtime. I was upstairs in my 4-year-old son's bedroom, reading him a story, trying to provide some semblance of peace. Suddenly, the door opened, and Leo walked in. He had a big, fake, theatrical smile on his face. "Hey, buddy," Leo said to my son. "Uncle Leo is going to tuck you in tonight and say prayers with you, okay?" My son looked confused, looking back and forth between me and Leo. Something inside my brain just snapped. The weeks of suppressed rage, the weeks of playing dumb for the lawyer, the sheer violation of this man trying to insert himself into my maternal space after destroying my life, it all rushed to the surface. I stood up, grabbed Leo by the upper arm, and physically shoved him out of the bedroom into the hallway. "Do not touch my children. Do not speak to my children. Get out of this hallway right now," I hissed, my voice low and trembling with pure fury. Leo stumbled back, looking shocked, and immediately started yelling for Mark. Mark came sprinting up the stairs like a knight in shining armor protecting his damsel. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Mark yelled, stepping directly in between me and Leo, physically shielding Leo with his body. "He has a right to be here. He is part of this family now. You are acting completely unhinged and violent. He is a homewrecker and a liar." I screamed, entirely losing control. I ran downstairs, grabbed Leo's designer shoes that were sitting by the front door, opened the door, and hurled them as hard as I could out into the driveway, straight into the pouring rain. "Get out. Both of you get out. I am calling the police. I will tell them you are trespassing and threatening me." Mark stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at me with a cold, calculating sneer. "Call them," he challenged. "Call the cops. Tell them your husband's friend is over for dinner. See what they do. You're losing your mind, and honestly, I'm going to make sure the custody judge sees exactly how unstable you are." They didn't leave. They went into the guest bedroom and locked the door, leaving me downstairs, shaking, crying, and feeling completely powerless in my own home. That brings us to today, and I am writing this in a state of absolute panic. The good news is that I managed to secure the hefty retainer fee for Sarah, my lawyer. I scraped together every bit of personal savings I had that wasn't in our main joint accounts, borrowed a portion from my broken-hearted in-laws, and officially signed the paperwork to initiate the divorce and custody filing. We are preparing an emergency motion to have Mark legally removed from the home due to severe emotional distress and the toxic environment for the children. The terrifying news? Mark caught on. This morning, I logged into our primary banking app to check if our joint checking account had cleared the mortgage payment. My heart stopped. The account balance, which usually holds a substantial cushion of our combined incomes, was sitting at exactly $14.12. Mark has completely cleaned out our primary savings account, our joint checking, and has transferred a massive chunk of liquid assets, nearly $80,000, into a private account I cannot access. When I texted him frantically asking what he did, he replied with a single, chilling sentence. Since you've decided to wage war instead of cooperating for the family, I am protecting my financial interests. You wanted a divorce, you get a divorce. Good luck. So, here I am. I am trapped in a house with a husband who hates me, a former best friend who thinks he's a romantic martyr, two confused toddlers, and a bank account that can barely buy a gallon of milk. I feel completely broke, utterly isolated, and gaslit into oblivion. Sarah says this financial move will look terrible to a judge once we get to court, but court takes time. And right now, time is a luxury I don't have. Please tell me there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I am officially at my breaking point. Final update. It has been 4 months since my last post, and I am finally writing to you from a place of absolute peace, safety, and triumph. When I last checked in, I was at my absolute lowest point, sitting in a house with a frozen bank account, a husband, and an ex-best friend who were actively trying to break my sanity, and 2 terrified toddlers. But as many of you reminded me in the comments, the darkest hour is just before the dawn. The light at the end of the tunnel wasn't just a flicker, it was a freight train of justice, and it completely leveled the toxic fantasy world Mark and Leo tried to build. Here is how the war finally ended. The day after Mark drained our joint accounts, my lawyer, Sarah, went completely scorched earth. She didn't just file standard divorce papers. She filed an emergency for temporary exclusive occupancy of the marital home and temporary sole legal and physical custody of our children. Sarah presented the judge with the mountain of evidence I had quietly compiled. She showed the timeline of the year-long affair, the explicit messages, and most importantly, the texts documenting their unhinged proposal. But what truly sealed the deal was the documentation of their recent behavior. The gaslighting, Mark bringing his affair partner into the house against my express wishes, Leo attempting to insert himself into the bedtime routine of my confused children, and the financial abuse of leaving a mother and 2 toddlers with $14.12 to look after themselves. The judge was absolutely livid. In our jurisdiction, while family courts try to remain neutral regarding standard infidelity, judges take a very dim view of parental alienation, toxic environments for children, and blatant financial draining before a legal separation. The emergency motion was granted. The judge issued an immediate court order stating that Mark had exactly 48 hours to pack his personal belongings and vacate the premises. He was barred from returning, and he was granted only highly restricted, supervised visitation with the kids at a neutral facility until a full custody hearing could be scheduled. I will never forget the day Mark had to pack his bags. It was a crisp, clear Saturday morning. I arranged for my in-laws, Mark's own parents, who remained firmly on my side throughout this nightmare, to take the kids to the park so they wouldn't have to witness the fallout. I stood at the top of the stairs, leaning against the banister, watching my husband drag suitcases down the hallway. Outside in our driveway, parked right where I had hurled his designer shoes into the rain weeks prior, was Leo's car. I could see Leo sitting in the passenger seat, staring anxiously up at the house, looking incredibly small and stripped of all his previous cosmic arrogance. When Mark reached the front door with his final box, he stopped. He turned around, looked up the stairs at me, and tried to deliver one final, theatrical speech to salvage his ego. "I hope you're happy with yourself," Mark sneered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and pathetic self-pity. "You did this. You took a beautiful, modern arrangement that could have given our children 2 fathers and a mother who loved them, and you destroyed it out of pure, vindictive bitterness. You ruined this family because your ego couldn't handle that I found real love. I hope the isolation is worth it." I didn't say a single word. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, and I didn't grant him the satisfaction of an argument. Instead, I calmly raised my iPhone, pressed record, and held it directly up to his face. I captured every single word of his unhinged, emotionally abusive rant to send straight to Sarah for our permanent custody file. When he realized I was completely unfazed and simply documenting his toxic behavior, his face contorted in embarrassment. He slammed the front door behind him, got into Leo's passenger seat, and drove away from the life we had built together. A few months have passed since that day, and the reality check has hit Mark and Leo like a tidal wave. The romanticized, fairy tale narrative of love wins quickly evaporated when it collided with the brutal, expensive reality of the real world. Because Mark spent so much money hiding liquid assets and trying to fight a losing legal battle, he ran through a massive chunk of his personal funds. They couldn't afford to buy a glamorous new house together. Instead, Mark and Leo are currently crammed into a highly expensive, tiny two-bedroom apartment in the city. The glamour of their secret romance is officially dead. From what my mother-in-law tells me, the cracks in their relationship are already showing. Mark is under immense financial stress, and Leo is discovering that being an active participant in a high-conflict custody situation and dealing with the societal fallout of being exposed as a homewrecker to our entire mutual college friend group is not the romantic movie he envisioned. They built their romance on the thrill of secrecy and betrayal. Now that they're stuck with each other in a cramped apartment with mounting legal bills, the magic is gone. My main priority over the last few months has been healing. Both of my children are currently in play therapy to help them process the sudden shift in their lives. My 4-year-old son has asked the inevitable, heartbreaking questions. A few weeks ago, he sat on the living room rug and asked, "Mommy, why does Daddy live with Uncle Leo in a different house now? Why doesn't Uncle Leo play with us here anymore?" I took a deep breath, knelt down to his eye level, and answered with age-appropriate, calm honesty. "Daddy and Mommy aren't married anymore, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups change their living arrangements, but Daddy still loves you, and Mommy is always going to be here to take care of you in this house." It is a slow process, but without the toxic energy of two gaslighting adults pacing the hallways, the atmosphere in our home has transformed into a sanctuary of peace and laughter again. Just last week, the divorce was officially finalized, and the final decree was signed by the judge. Because Mark tried to hide nearly $80,000 of our joint assets at the start of the proceedings, the judge penalized him severely during the final asset division. I was awarded exclusive, permanent ownership of our marital home. I was granted primary physical custody of both children, with Mark receiving standard alternating weekend visitation, and Leo is strictly prohibited from being present during Mark's parenting time until the kids are older, a clause Sarah successfully fought for. Furthermore, due to the income disparity and Mark's financial misconduct, he was ordered to pay a significant monthly sum in both child support and alimony. The double betrayal I experienced a few months ago nearly took my life. Losing my husband of 7 years and my platonic soulmate of over a decade in a single morning felt like a psychological execution. They wanted to build a beautiful new life on the scorched ashes of mine, and they genuinely expected me to smile and applaud them for it. But I didn't let them. Today, Mark and Leo are completely blocked on every single aspect of my life. The only communication I have with Mark is filtered through a court-mandated parenting app strictly for scheduling custody drop-offs. The cancer has been entirely cut out of my life. I lost my husband, and I lost my best friend. But through the fire, I found my sanity, my boundaries, and my immense strength as a mother. To everyone on Reddit who read my first post, who validated my pain, and who screamed at me to run to a lawyer when I felt like I was losing my mind, thank you. You reminded me that I wasn't crazy. I am a survivor, my kids are safe, and the future is finally bright.